Welcome back to the first episode of 2024 for the Franchise Happy Hour. In this episode, we're joined by the phenomenal Mike Halpern, the CEO of Franchise Freeway, the host of the Franchise QB, and with over a decade of experience as a franchise consultant with FranServe, Mike is a true trailblazer in the world of franchising, helping both entrepreneurs find that perfect match in the franchise universe since 2006. As a mastermind behind the Franchise Freeway, Mike has been a guiding force, connecting franchise buyers with the ideal franchise system. His commitment to excellence and passion for empowering entrepreneurs has led him to launch the Franchise Quarterback podcast, where he shares invaluable insights and helps entrepreneurs win big in franchising. So prepare for a spirited conversation as Mike shares his wealth of knowledge, unveils the secrets to those franchise successes, and provides a roadmap for entrepreneurs aiming to make it big in the world of franchising. So with that being said, Mike, welcome to the Franchise Happy Hour.
Ellen, thank you so much for having me. You talked me up so big. I hope I can deliver on this podcast, but I really appreciate first one of 2024. That's awesome. I love the new year. A lot of excitement in our industry with candidates looking to change their lives and get into franchising. So it's an exciting time for both of us with Joshua Tree Experts and with Franchise Freeway and the QB podcast. So thanks for having me on the Franchise Happy Hour. This is quite a treat.
Absolutely. I know we've been talking about this one for a while, ever since the FranServe conference there. So I'm super excited to have you on. I know you're a wealth of knowledge. You've been doing this for a bit. So I think the listeners are really going to take a lot of value from that. Let's dive right in, man. I love hitting the ground running. I do have one quick question before we get started here. I know it's the happy hour. Are you drinking anything on that end over there?
I figured that you were going to ask me that. So check this out here. So this is my Sierra Nevada hazy little thing IPA. I'm an IPA guy. And you'll see here, I'll bring it in here. This is my Wheel of Fortune glass. And this can be a little side tangent of our conversation, but I was a I was a contestant rather on Wheel of Fortune back in 2022. I don't know if you knew that about me, but it's been a fun icebreaker with a lot of the people I work with because Wheel of Fortune's been around for 40 years, and it's a piece of Americana. It's an iconic game show, and I was lucky enough to participate in it. So I got my Wheel of Fortune glass, I got my IPA, and I'm ready to hang out.
Dude, that's such a cool thing. I gotta say, you're the first person I think I've ever met that's been on there. I gotta ask, did you win any money from it? How'd you
Good day
do?
for me. It was pretty good. I kind of I'll tease the audience if they want to check out my clip. You can go to YouTube, type in Mike Halpern Wheel of Fortune. It's awesome because it's only 2 minutes and like ABC put together a little hyper reel. I came out ahead. It was a really good day, and really overall, the whole experience was incredible. I mean, it was like a whirlwind. Flew out to LA on a Tuesday, taped on a Wednesday, flew home on a Thursday, and this was during pandemic. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to bring my wife and my two sons out with me because it was during that little period where they just allowed the contestants to participate. But man, it was super cool. It was just great to meet Pat and Vanna and just kind of have my little 2 minutes of fame.
That's a really, really cool experience, man. I'm happy for you. That's awesome. And you got the glass at least. At the very least, you got a glass, right? I mean,
And a
that's
lot of
cool.
people think I was on Jeopardy, so they give me credit for being smarter than I really am. All I did was spin the thing and guess a puzzle, but it worked
Guess
out. So
letters.
yeah.
No, that's cool, man. That's
Yeah.
cool. Well, hey, I appreciate you getting on here. I love that glass. I'm having a little Basil Hayden, if you've ever had that. It's a little bourbon.
I
It
have.
goes down real smooth. So
Oh,
I like kicking it off with that.
what's the significance of the Red Sox glass? Are you a Sox fan? You from the area? What's kind of the deal there?
I am. I've been a Sox fan since I was about 12.
Okay.
Love baseball. Baseball has always been my sport. I go every year up to Fenway. It's about a 6-hour drive. We go up every year, watch the Yankees get beat by the Red Sox, which is great. I love seeing that. So yeah, my stepdad just got this for me for Christmas. So I was like, Hey, got to put it to good use. Mike's a perfect opportunity to do that.
Yeah,
So
I'm a
I'm heck
baseball guy
psyched.
too. My son, I actually was just at the high school yesterday for the baseball interest meeting. My son's a junior, and he's been playing on the high school team for a couple of years. And our new head coach, after like I think it's been 20 years, the previous head coach was a great guy. He left, and the new coach is a former big leaguer. So there's this kind of air of excitement going around, just bringing like his experience being in the big leagues to the local high school level. So it's pretty cool. And I also coached my sons for 14 little league seasons. So I was a little league baseball coach, and it's cool because you get to see these kids who, I had them when they were like 7, 8, 9, and now they're like in high school. It's just, they're like young men, and I had them when
Mhm.
they were, staring at the airplanes and running around, not knowing which way to go. So it's kind of cool to see it come full circle.
Absolutely. That is really cool. What team was he playing for before he came down to coach?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I
A
haven't done.
professional team.
Yeah, he was on a professional team. I just haven't gone down the rabbit hole of tracking him,
Mhm.
but he's got his own sports training business. So
Mm.
it's like an independent business that he operates to train athletes, not just in baseball, but in a lot of sports. And he's also just taken on the responsibilities to be the head varsity baseball coach. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. But he seems like a great guy.
Well, very, very cool. I mean, that's a unique opportunity for those young men in there. I always love sports to really build character, bring some stability into a young man's life as he's grown up, and young women too as they grow up. So sports have always been a big part of my life. So that's really cool that you get to share that as well with your kids.
And that was part of the reason I launched the Franchise QB podcast because I figured
Hmm.
sports just resonates with people. And
Yeah.
I mean, I played 1 year of organized football in eighth grade because I grew up in PA and we had middle school sports down here in Virginia. They don't. But my real passion athletically is tennis. I'm in my 40s and I play twice a week, and it's just it's like chess on your feet. I just love getting exercise and just competing, and it's awesome. So it's hope I'm doing it for many years to come.
Absolutely. I love golf. I just picked it up like in March, which I'm like 31 years old. I don't know why I would pick up golf when I'm 30, but I gotta say I fell in love and I got the bug, and I hope I can play that for a while too. So
It's a fun sport, frustrating but fun. I love golf too.
yeah,
I just, for me, it's like if I have 4 hours, I'm playing tennis. But
yeah.
I definitely played a lot of golf in my day. Love the sport, and yeah, when the spring comes, I get that itch.
Absolutely. That's good to hear. We'll have to shoot around together. If you ever come
Do
out
it.
this way,
All
we'll
right.
definitely shoot around together at our
And
club.
if there's any trees in the way, we'll call Joshua Tree Experts, get them out of the way so I have a clear path to the green.
There you go. I don't want to end up in the woods, man. Hey, what? Let's I love it, man. I appreciate that. Let's do this. I really want to hear something, and I know the viewers are probably wanting to hear this. I want to hear your story. What was your initiation into the franchise community? How did you get started? Was it by accident? Was it on purpose? Tell us that story of how Mike Halpern got into franchising.
Yeah, great question. So it was a little bit of by accident. I was one of the few people who went to college for marketing information systems and got a job in marketing information systems. So I was like, okay, I'm actually doing what I was trained to do. That was back in 99, so I'm dating myself a little bit, but back then the internet was kind of a baby
Mm.
commercially, and I worked for a .com startup in the textbook space, which ultimately competed with Amazon. Amazon won that one, but on the East Coast, it was a company called Varsity Books. Great experience, awesome people. Still have some really good friends I met all those years ago, but the company didn't work out, and the internet bubble burst in the early 2000s. And one of my coworkers lived near a guy who was into franchising, and his name was Dan Rowe. He started a company called Fran Smart, which is one of the kind of franchise sales organizations that's still in our inventory today with FranServe. And yeah, I was one of the first employees hired there in '01, and just kind of, it was old school. Back then, we had a couple of brands, no brands that were really that large or that known. So it was like taking these emerging brands and trying to identify, good fits. people that generally owned other franchises that were looking to diversify. So yeah, it was kind of interesting. Back then, there was this big book called the Chain Restaurant Guide, and it listed all the people that own multi-units in the food space. So I would just flip through there, call them up, and say, "Hey, we're growing this brand. Would it be a good complement to your Burger King holdings or a good complement to your KFC holdings?" And I just enjoyed talking to people, so it was kind of a good fit for me. So I did that for 5 years, from 2001 to 2006. FranSmart, their claim to fame at the time was Five Guys Burgers. It is obviously a international phenomenon at this point, and it was really cool
Yeah.
early. Yeah, I mean, product's phenomenal. They're based here in Northern Virginia where I live. At the time, there were just four restaurants, and it was just a local thing. But once we kind of flipped the switch and it became a franchise model, it just skyrocketed. I mean, I'd never seen anything like it, and it got me more interested in franchising. So I've spent, my whole career really on the development side, working with candidates. And then in 2006, it was, I had 5 years at FranSmart. It was kind of time for a new challenge. So I left there. At the time, I was the VP of development, and I started my own company, which is Franchise Consulting LLC, which trades as Franchise Freeway. And yeah, from 2000, and that was when my first son was born. So it was kind of an interesting, and I talk to my candidates about this now. It's like I took this leap of faith to go from this cushy employed situation with a good salary, good commissions, and I'm just going to leave all that behind and start this thing and just kind of hope it works. So to a
Hmm.
certain extent, I had a good degree of confidence because what I was doing was very similar to the tasks that I was doing
Hmm.
in franchise development, but doing it on your own is a whole nother ball of wax because you have to do everything on your own. You
Yeah.
have to figure it all out, and there's a learning curve there. But yeah, my company was started when my kid was born. So however old he is, he's 17 now. That's how old I've been self-employed. So I do kind of use that when I talk to people about taking that leap of faith and becoming an entrepreneur and betting on yourself. So yeah, I did that. And then I really, you mentioned FranServe. I joined its predecessor. It was called Franchise Alliance back in 2011, but I didn't
Hmm.
really do much with it. It was kind of more of a
Hmm.
hedge if I was ever in between clients and I wanted to have access to a network. And then I guess between 2011 and 2014, Franchise Alliance kind of splintered into IFPG and FranServe. I don't know the whole chronology of it.
Hmm.
So, but then when pandemic hit and my restaurant and hospitality stuff got slow, I said, "Hey, this is a great time to kind of lean into FranServe and explore categories that are thriving despite hospitality just, getting hurt because nobody could go out." So I've really been with FranServe full time as a consultant since 2021. It's been about
Hmm.
three years, but I've been in the industry for my whole career. So it's kind of neat, kind of pivoting a little bit from, representing specific brands, kind of like
Hmm.
what you do at Joshua Tree. I did a lot of that as a 1099 contractor for my clients in the food space. And
Hmm.
then, now I'm kind of sitting on the other side of the fence and more buyer's agency. I'm helping candidates navigate this huge landscape of, what's out there and trying to find the best home for them in franchising or licensing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good personal story that, I think it's always about the stories that you have to be able to connect with a candidate well on a story to see if you're going to be able to work well with them. So I think that's a really good personal story that you can say, hey, I've been there, I've been down that road, I've had those fears, I've had, all of the family members, if they do support you or don't support you, I've had all that. I understand it. I understand what you're going through. So I think that's really cool. What was the inspiration behind, was there an inspiration, I guess I should ask, behind Franchise Freeway? Was it like, hey, you want to take the freeway to the franchise? Is that what it was, or what was
It's a
that?
good question. Wow, I got to think back to '06 when I wanted something I could trademark. So my
Hmm.
LLC was called Franchise Consulting LLC. I can't think of a more boring name than that. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to call my company that because that's super boring. So I was looking for something that would be memorable, similar to the tie-in with Wheel of Fortune. I like wordplay. I thought Franchise Freeway had easy alliteration. It kind of rolls off the tongue. And I did that. I mean, it's not that deep, you know, it was just something that I thought I could kind of play with. And back in the day, I know I had like marketing slogans like, you know, hop on the freeway or kind of your roadway or path to success in franchising. But yeah, it was just
Sure.
more, it looked cool, sounded cool, and that was the deal.
I like it, man. Sometimes just looking cool and sounding cool is 100% enough.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah, and you already touched on, sports have always been a big part of your life. That's where you got the idea for the franchise QB. I love the term, when you put it out, you're like, hey, our weekly huddle, I think is what you call it. I love that. I think that's
oh,
so clever.
thanks, man.
Yeah,
Yeah,
very
you know, it's funny. I secured the franchiseqb.com domain name like 10 years ago, and I've been looking for something to do with it.
no way.
And once I was like watching some of my peers in France serve, and I'm like, wow, podcasting's kind of interesting. You know, I want to do something that puts me outside of my comfort zone. You know, it gives me an opportunity to meet new people. I'm like, what am I going to call this thing? And I'm like, well, I already own this domain, and I want to help kind of quarterback the franchising effort and help people kind of navigate around and help them see what's out there. It just seemed to me to be a perfect fit. So I just took the color scheme of Franchise Freeway. I took the shield, that's kind of the interstate sign, and I put that behind my logo. And kind of like you were saying, you developed your, branding for the franchise happy hour. I kind of did the same thing there. I did hire a contractor to help me with it because I'm not a graphic artist, but yeah, and sports to me has just always been something that I'm passionate about, and I watch sports, I play sports, my kids are into it, so it just and I think
Mhm.
it connects with a lot of people.
Very cool, very cool. I think it works very well. I mean, it's clever. And sometimes things just happen like that for a reason. You don't know why
Yeah.
something's, you're developing something right then and there, but what is it like 10, 15 years later, you're like, I have this perfect opportunity to actually use this thing. That's awesome.
And I mean, I basically had that domain just redirecting to franchisefreeway.com. And I'm like, I
Hmm.
got to do something useful with this and like help
Hmm.
people and do something. And it's been a really good compliment. The one thing out of podcasting I didn't expect was, the amount of instant credibility that candidates see
Hmm.
in that, because I guess when you put yourself out there and you're creating content, that resonates with people, and I've enjoyed it. And I mean, I get to connect with my peers, that sit on the other side of the dialogues my candidates are having and learn more about their brand. So it's been a lot of fun. I mean, I'm still new at it. I think you and I think that was episode 13.
Hmm.
So, we'll see where it goes, but so far so good.
Yeah, I gotta say thank you so much for being allowing me to get on that. That was a lot of fun. You know, you had mentioned something just now, you said help people. I love that term. I love when we talk about helping people. Is there a success story that, if you reach into your vault of, I'm sure you've placed hundreds of people's in franchising at this point, but if you reached into your vault and you thought of one success story that you've, taken someone through this process, maybe it was difficult. You don't have to say any names or brands or anything like that if you don't want to, but is there someone who sticks out to you and what was their story a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I that's a lot of the joy I get out of this is hearing when people succeed. And business is tough. I mean, even when you have a franchise, that doesn't guarantee success. But the only franchisee that I've had on my podcast so far was a guy named Adam. He came to me about a year ago, and he was looking at a property management business. And the one he wanted was sold out in his market. So I said, let's look at some other stuff. And we ended up he invested in a painting franchise. And over the course of, let's call it 6 months, he recruited
Hmm.
two friends of his that were college buddies in different markets in the same state, and they co-invested with him, and they ultimately had six territories in three markets. And they're about, they launched this year, which is kind of fun to talk about a new owner.
Hmm.
And when I have it on the podcast, he was actually one of the people that inspired me to do it. He's like, you should consider doing this. And when I did, I'm like, well, I have to have you on because you recommended that I become a podcaster. And he thanked me. He's like, Mike, I would have never found this brand if you didn't step outside of my comfort zone and show me something that was completely different. Helping people manage their properties and finding painting solutions are not very connected. So I think that's one of the
Mhm.
things that's nice about being a consultant is, when someone comes to me and they say, I'm looking for a fitness studio or I'm looking for a senior care business. I'll show them those things because we have them in our inventory. And I'd like to think I can find the brands that have great leadership, good economics, they're trending the right way. But I like to
Mhm.
introduce those wild cards. That's what makes my job fun, is to say, well, I know you were looking at this brick and mortar business, but what about this home services concept? Or what about this
Mhm.
exterior services concept? And in most cases, they invest outside of their initial brand or category of interest, which really surprised me when I became a consultant. Because, like I said, I spent 14 plus years just in the restaurant space.
Mhm.
And people came to me for restaurants and I placed them in restaurants. If they didn't
Mhm.
want a restaurant, I was kind of like, let's shake hands and part company. But now it's like, all right, well, if this one doesn't work out, let's take a step back and figure out why you didn't like it. And let's
Mhm.
find something that checks your boxes. So it gives me a chance to kind of continue the relationship with that candidate until they realize that, this is the right one for me. So, in that regard, it's been a whole lot of fun.
That's awesome. I love that you had that. He's the only one that you've had on your podcast so far. I think that's really cool. That's got to be something special for him too. Um, I like what you're saying about, you talked about a little bit about, really those the finding that right fit. I think that obviously as as a developer, I'm on the other side of it, right? I'm talking about one brand. When you're working through a candidate, what are some things, that you recommend? Maybe is it like be vulnerable, be open-minded? Like, do you prefer when people come to you with like, hey, this is kind of like some of the things I'm interested in? How do you take them through that journey?
It's good to have some direction. If someone comes to you and they're like, one thing that's challenging is if you have a candidate that has, they claim to have unlimited financial resources, which sometimes I get the feeling that that's not entirely accurate. Then they don't have a geographic preference. They're like, well, I could do it where I live in this state, but I'm also open-minded to anywhere in the country. And they're like, I don't have an industry. So if they're like super vague on everything, it's really
Mhm.
hard for me to do what I do. So yeah, some direction as it relates to capital, geography, skills even. It doesn't have to be I want to, be in a tree business or I want to be in a fitness studio. It's like, I'm really good at talking to people. I love
Mhm.
sales. I hate sales. Like whatever those key characteristics are, I just use
Mhm.
my own instincts to go in the inventory and match them with brands. And we also have resources where we can do personality assessments and profiles, and that technology helps kind of spit out a list of recommended concepts where there's
Mhm.
a 99% match or a 97% match. And I'll weave that into my recommendation. So, it really all walks of life. I mean, people will come to me that are super like disciplined and this is exactly what I want. And others are like, hey, I'm putting my faith in your hands to help guide
Mhm.
this. And I wouldn't say I prefer one over the other. I think having an open mind is important because there's a lot out there that most people don't know about. And I learned that myself. I mean, once I became a consultant and looking at 30 to 40 industry categories, I'm like, wow, I didn't even know these things existed,
Yeah.
in alternative wellness and in all this stuff. So yeah, and the other thing that I have to do is take a step back because what's good for my client or my candidate may not be what I want to invest in, but it
Mhm.
might be perfect for them. So I need to sometimes like not look at it through my own lens, but look at it through, what might be appealing to them. Or the other thing that's cool about FranServe is at least twice a week we get updates on which brands have placed candidates. So I'm aware of which brands are very active in the broker, coach, consulting community, who are eager to work with consultants because I don't want friction. Like, I want to have a
Mhm.
pleasant experience working with my candidate and working with the brand and trying to be the unbiased, kind of wingman, like helping them through the
Mm-hmm.
process. And it's much easier to do when you're working with, development directors like you and others that are like super willing to work within the broker, coach, consultant community. Because we do have
Mm-hmm.
brands that are in our portfolio, but it's just a lot of uphill friction trying to place a candidate. And, who needs that?
Yeah, absolutely. I can say this. I've had both sides of the coin, from our perspective as well. It's like I've had consultants and brokers who were like, I would send them an email, I'd talk about, send them a text or something. Hey, this is how the call went. These are some of the, their fears or, things that I could foresee them, almost getting in their own way sometimes. And then they respond right away. And then I've had the total opposite of that where I sent them, 10, 15 call logs
You
and
get
it's like
nothing.
ghosting.
Yeah.
So we feel it too. We feel it too.
Totally get it. Yeah. I mean, it cuts both ways, right? I mean, same for candidates. Like if I have a candidate that, I put a lot of work into conducting their
Mm-hmm.
search and I've selected some great brands for them to evaluate and then they no show, it's like, well, how much time do I want to invest with a person that like isn't very responsible? Then once I introduce them to a franchise system, how are they going to behave? Is it going to be the
Mm-hmm.
same pattern? Because that my reputation is at stake. And I want to like I do training for FranServe and I am day one, class one, the role of a franchise consultant. What do we do in the industry? And
Mm-hmm.
I am like always say when I refer a client or a candidate to a brand, I want them to say, hey, this candidate came from Mike Halpern. I know this is
Mm-hmm.
someone that's been vetted. I know this is a candidate that's interested. He's not wasting our time,
Yeah.
and that's the reputation you want in this industry. And it cuts both ways. If I have a brand that is not responding to territory checks or introductions or just a frickin' frack, then
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not gonna, there's too many brands, I'd rather
Mm-hmm.
introduce one where I'm gonna, because if that's the experience I'm having, what's my client gonna experience?
Yeah. And not only that, what's the client going to experience if they sign that franchise agreement? Are they even going to have any support? I think that that's crucial, that relationship from the moment that that starts from a brand there, you have to make sure like it has to feel right. And I think the candidates sometimes they can feel when it's not.
Yeah.
And
It's like
sometimes
if
you do
if
have to fire them though. You have to fire your candidate
yeah,
sometimes, can't be afraid to do it.
I was on a call this week with some, and that's the one thing I love about FranServe is we collaborate. There's a lot of people that do what I do that I really respect, and I learn a lot from them. And they'll ask me like, "What do you do when you have a candidate that you want to fire?" And it's not
Mm-hmm.
easy, right? Because like you want to do everything you can to help someone, but and what I do in that situation, if they still want to find something, is refer them over to someone else. Maybe they're a better personality match. Maybe I'm not the right guy to help them, but someone else that I know and trust can, and I'll
Mm-hmm.
refer them to another FranServe consultant. They'll
Mm-hmm.
make the placement, and it's like a win-win-win. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, in any business, right? You want to make sure that the
absolutely.
relationship works, and sometimes it doesn't. That's just the way it goes.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, I think you do a great job. I've seen your communication going through. I've talked to you on the phone quite a few times. We've had great communication. So just setting up things with you, I know that if we work together, I feel comfortable with you, just picking up the phone saying, hey, I can give Mike a call. And I'm pretty sure he'll answer. And if he doesn't, guess what? He's gonna call me back. And I think
Well, I
any of the
appreciate that, Bill. It
candidates
means that means a lot to me because that's the reputation, and that's just a product of behavior. Like if you do the right things, then that should be, the way that you're received by your peers and colleagues. And, yeah, look, I'm not perfect every day, but I try my best, and that's kind of all you can do, right?
Yeah, and we're a PG-13, but you're kicking ass, man.
Thanks, man. Um,
Absolutely, brother. So hey, I want to talk about, I always talk about like those common misconceptions in franchising, and I want to hear it from your side because you've worked in something that is a common misconception, right? You've worked in the franchise food industry. Like when most
yeah.
people think of that, that's what they think of. Other than food, do you think there's any of those like common misconceptions that people have when they first think about franchising?
No, I think one of the biggest challenges that most candidates come across is the concept of paying a royalty in perpetuity. That just scares people. And
Hmm.
I always say, look, let's look at the value proposition here, not just at the number, because, if you have an independent business that's going to have a 15% margin, or you're going to have a franchise business that after you pay the royalty, you're going to have a 20% margin. Which business would you take, right? But no two brands are equal. Like I ask my candidates to talk to current owners and say,
Hmm.
I understand you're paying a 6% royalty, seven, eight, whatever it is, sliding scale. And what are you getting for that? Like, are you really
Hmm.
getting support? Are you happy? Like, are you, you know, is is it like, for example, let's say you have a business that does 1 million in sales, you're paying 6%, 60 grand a year, right? So are you getting the equivalent of a $60,000 a year caliber employee out of the support you're getting from the system? And if the answer is no, then you should probably cross that franchise off your list and move along. But you might find that, like, for example, with me, with FranServe, we pay, it's a licensing opportunity. So I'm a licensee, not a franchisee, but I have an annual commitment that I pay. And I tell new people that come into FranServe that it's a bargain. Like I pay
Hmm.
basically the equivalent of 10 grand a year to be part of the system. And I get 100 grand worth of value out of them in terms of the educational component. I don't have to deal with invoicing, the peers the amount of business I'm able to generate by having contact with other FranServe consultants that send me business and I send them business. Like to me, it's invaluable. So if a candidate is coming to look at FranServe and stack it up against the other networks, I'm the first to say that it's a bargain. It's a deep discount
Hmm.
for me. Now, that may not be the
Hmm.
case for the next FranServe consultant that answers that question. So I kind of put that on my candidates when they look at a franchise, like talk to the owners, find out what
Hmm.
they're getting for their royalty, and is there a great value proposition?
I really liked how you said whatever that percentage is, and if you do 1 million, is it worth like that employee? I never thought about it like that, but I love that analogy. That are you getting the support of, if you hired somebody for that rate, would you expect them to do those things? That's a really great way to put that. I appreciate you
It
saying that. That's
quantifies it,
awesome.
and as an owner, you think about like here are the key employees I need to run my business, and
Hmm.
what's a $60,000 employee look like for you, and then you can kind of measure that against the services you get and see if it's worth it, and
Yeah.
usually when you ask that question, you'll get an answer. It's either going to be, yeah, these guys are on it, they crush, they get me what I need, or you know what, come to think of it, I'm paying my royalty in year five and I feel like there's not a lot there. So that's pretty
Hmm.
telling. If you hear that, that am I going to lean into this business or is it time to kind of walk away?
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. That's really cool. I've never heard that. So I thought that was, I've always heard, the idea of the royalties is like, that was, you're paying your way in because they took out all those speed bumps. It's like, that was the structure, but I like your analogy a lot better. I
No,
think
I get
that's
that
really
too.
cool.
I mean, look,
Hmm.
that's the lifeblood of the franchisor's income, right? Or at
Hmm.
least revenue. I mean, there's other ways franchisors earn money. Item six can be pretty robust with all the fees that a candidate pays. But look, at the end of the day, like I like to educate my candidates that, pay the royalty and be happy to pay it because you're getting just bombarded with phenomenal services, ideas, and support. And if you're
Hmm.
not, then your system isn't delivering on that promise.
Hmm. No, it's absolutely so important. I think the main reason to be in a franchise is for the support. It's not just for that business in a box, right? It's for what the franchisor can give you so that you're not figuring these things out on your own. If they're not doing that, they're not, I almost see it that like, they're not holding up their end of the bargain. Like
I
you
totally
guys
agree.
made an
Yeah.
agreement. It's like a husband and wife, right? If the wife's doing everything and the husband is just like chilling. Guess what? That's not going to
Work.
be a
Yeah.
happy marriage.
Yeah, and I also think that to kind of piggyback on what you're saying, the peer network and the community that forms within the franchise is really valuable.
Mhm.
Like having someone you can call in another market and say, "Hey, I'm having this problem. This is how corporate's telling me to handle it. How have you handled it?" And just having
Mhm.
relationships within the network. I mean, it's super meaningful. And my business has grown tremendously as a consultant purely because open to collaborating with other consultants that are good at what they do, and you learn
Mhm.
from them, right? I mean, like if you get into a franchise, do you want to be the worst performer? No, you want to be the top performer. How do you do that?
Mhm.
You talk to the other owners that are crushing and you say, "Hey, what are you doing for X, Y, and Z?" And do your best to emulate that. So yeah, I mean, I try to have my candidates seek out the top performers and find out if they're like them. You know, they might find
Mhm.
out they're not, and maybe that system is not good for them. But if they find people that are just, top 10% in the system and they're like, I can do that, that's your franchise, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good tip for people who are, maybe they're in the process now and they're just kind of listening in, they saw franchise, I'm going to click that. I'm a happy hour kind of guy. That's a tip right there. I like that a lot. Talk to the top people. If you vibe well, do it right. Like it makes
Exactly.
sense.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's a really good tip. Um, when you're approaching the step in your process where you're going to start matching, candidates with, different brands and stuff like that. Well, I know you talked a little bit about you do that assessment. Um, is there anything that you're looking in particular, whether it be qualities, is there something that you do that you feel is very beneficial to make that successful match?
Yeah, I ask them what they don't like to do. I want to
Okay.
eliminate brands that I know are just going to very quickly turn them off. So if they don't like to, they're a back office person, they don't want to be out in front of the customer or they don't want to interface with the customer, then I'm going to show them brands where they can do that.
Mm,
So my thing is like, I want to find out exactly, this is cliche in our industry, but you do have to understand the why. Like if I can't
mhm,
find a reason why the candidate wants to own a franchise, then it's really not, I'm not going to be able to help them, right? If they're
mhm,
like, I don't know, I just want to make more money, not a great reason.
mhm,
If they have a really viable reason to like want to either diversify their income or, I find candidates all the time that want to leave corporate America because they feel like they're underappreciated, they're underpaid, they feel like it's time to take their shot. Like, let me help you take that shot. And
mhm,
another, you talked about misconceptions earlier. Another one is like, the value that we bring to the table as consultants. I use the real estate analogy because it's one that a lot of people kind of resonates with them. But if you are looking to buy a home, some people will go find a home on their own, but most people will hire a realtor as a buyer's agent to go show them the inventory that's out there and help guide them to make decisions, give them insights about the community, the schools, the neighborhood. That's what I do in franchising. So,
mhm,
and there's no fees that the buyer has to pay. Just like in real estate, the seller of that home is paying their listing agent and they're paying the buyer's agent for bringing that candidate to the table.
mhm,
So in this case, you're the listing agent, I'm the buyer's agent. We're working in tandem to vet the candidate, make sure they're a right fit for the system. And at the end of the day, they're paying the same fees to get in and the same royalties and the same project investment as if they just went out wildly on their own and tried to find the right fit. So it's like finding a needle in a haystack that way. But if you have great guidance with good coaching and you have, I try to find my candidates brands that I've met with. I know leadership, I know economics, I know how it's trending, I measure closures. Like if I can bring that data to the table, I feel like my
mhm,
candidate has a huge leg up and then they can use their own instincts to figure out what they like and what they don't like. So just to, I guess to sum it all up, I really start off by figuring out what people don't want to do and then talking them out of stuff that they might really want to do. Like you
mhm,
mentioned food before. Food is tough. I mean, for good operators that can control their food cost and their labor cost and not have, theft from vendors, employees,
Mm-hmm.
customers in some cases,
Mm-hmm.
they're great. Like I know a few mentors of mine and leaders in the food space that are just amazing at what they do. But it's a hard way, if there's easier businesses out there than food. Matter of fact, when I get a food guy that comes to me, I have a ton of confidence that if I show them a home services brand, that they're going to be able to execute because it's going to be fewer employees, fewer headaches, and the returns are pretty decent. Like food margins are
Mm-hmm.
tough. So for certain people, restaurants are phenomenal. For other
Mm-hmm.
people, they're better as guests at restaurants, not owners.
I like that a lot. And you're absolutely right. Hey, there's a reason that they're franchises, right? Food, obviously, it is the right fit for some people, but I love that there's tons of options out there. And, in the world of franchising, what are there like 8,000 franchise concepts? You know, I love putting this out there. Mike, why do they need to come to you? What is it that you think being a franchise consultant provides them that they can't do on their own?
I think just going back to the points I made before, I think that having a guided search is helpful because we've been there, we've done it.
Mm-hmm.
Like next week, I'm going to be gone Thursday and Friday. I'm hopping on an airplane. I'm flying to Michigan. I'm meeting with a printing franchisor that has multiple concepts. The next month in February, I'll be flying out to Colorado to meet with a home services franchisor. In March, I've already booked my flights to Nashville. I'm flying out to see another home services franchisor. So my job is to go out there and participate in kind of consultant discovery days, if you will, where I can kick the tires, see the training facilities, meet the leaders, and then come back and talk to my candidate and say, hey, you don't have to go out there. I've done it. And here's what I learned. And then if
Mm-hmm.
they have enough confidence in the brand, they're going to do that as well. So it's like, it saves people a lot of time and money. And
Mm-hmm.
look, it's not for everyone too. Some people are just really like, I just want to do this on my own, and great. They're not going to be a good fit for me to help them, but that's fine, to each their own.
Yeah, no, and by the way, I applaud you for doing those things. Not every consultant's out there spending time, money, time away from family. That's huge, right? I mean, that's a whole part of you becoming an entrepreneur, so you can do stuff like that. Um, and I appreciate you as a franchisor who hosts those days. We find a lot of value in them. We actually just
Cheers, and I'm
finished one
bummed out, but
today.
I'm going to the next one.
I got you. Don't worry.
You
You're
guys are not
top of
far
my
from where I
list.
grew up. My family, I'm from Bucks County, PA, which is just about a half hour north of Philly. So I don't really have a great excuse. Next time I'm coming up.
Oh man. So where do you live now by chance?
I'm in Chantilly, Fairfax County, Virginia. So I'm about half hour west of DC.
Oh man, that's worth a drive for a round of golf and a trip out to a
All
job site. I'll tell you that. So we're gonna get something going here,
right, you
Mike, in
can
the
you can hold
spring.
me to that. You can hold me to that.
I appreciate that. Well, hey man, I really appreciate you getting on here, talking to us about franchising, talking to the listeners about all the, you know, different assets that you can bring to them, all that guidance. But there is one thing that we're missing here, Mike. If someone out there is listening right now and they want to get in contact with you and talk about the best franchise systems for themselves, what's the best way that they can do that?
Well, first of all, Dylan, thank you. It was really awesome to be on the show. Had a blast. This was super fun. And I got to the end of my beer, so the timing is right to kind of wrap up there. But the best way they can get in touch with me is they can go to franchiseqb.com. They can go to franchisefreeway.com, or email me at mike@franchisefreeway.com, and we can set up a consultation and get the process underway. Typically, it's about a 60 to 90-day process to take a candidate, through the process of educating them about the franchising industry, introducing them to brands. But look, I've placed candidates in 3 weeks and I've placed them in a year. So it just depends on the amount of time and the willingness to kind of engage in the process for the candidate. But Dylan, thanks so much for having me on the show. This has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely, man. We'll have you back on for sure. That was a lot of fun for me. I always like to end on this. And honestly, it was a perfect time for me too. I just ended. So we're going to do a little empty glass here, but cheers to you, brother. Cheers
Cheers,
to
man.
franchise success. How about that? All right,
You
buddy.
too. I appreciate it, bud. Take it
No
easy.
problem. Take care.